Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore. I'd like to welcome you to the MuseScore Café. So, today is the first Wednesday of the month, meaning I'm going to do my Ask Me Anything session, which are always fun because I usually get lots of questions about lots of different topics and we get to kind of keep moving along. And I have a couple have already come in on the community, and so I'll try to address those. And by all means, just if you've got questions about MuseScore, about 3 or 4, this is the place, this is the time, and it should be possible if you need to attach a score in order for me to be able to understand your question. Should be possible to do that in the chat with a little paperclip thing. So by all means, if you've got some questions ready, feel free to start asking now, and then I will kind of pile them up. But also, you know, help me out a little bit if a message scrolls by and I don't see it. Someone, you know, just give me a little heads up that there's a question I haven't that I missed along the way. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I'll just start with the things that I've already seen and address those as best I can. So the first thing I want to do is actually bring up one that Colleen posted a couple days ago with let me see, which folder did I put it in? Oh yeah, and something's wrong with that folder. There was a score that had an issue with it was in the cafe folder. That's where I want to be anyhow. So let's go to my cafe folder, shall I? Mastering MuseScore Cafe 2022. This is where I put stuff. And so she had this score here that has this giant tempo marking. And she figured it out, but I want to point this out because there's a number of things that can happen, and some of them are real common, and some of them aren't. And what went wrong here is not a common thing, and it took me a minute or two to figure out how that tempo mark got so big. So let me go through my process. Well, the first thing I did is make sure I have the inspector open, so I'm going to press F8. And the inspector is here open, and it's normally open unless you've closed it, but I close it usually when I'm doing these cafes to have a little more room to work in the music. And when I selected this, I'm looking over here, and I'm seeing, 28 point is the font size for the tempo marking, and that's not normal. I mean, that's not normally correct. Normally the tempo should be, 12 or something. And I'm wondering, well, how did that happen? And if she had just somehow cranked up the tempo, like let's turn this up. Now you'll see there's a reset button, and I can click that to set it back to the default. So it seemed like somehow she had set the default to 28. And I'm like, well, how did that happen? So next thing I did is I went to Format, Style, because I'm like looking to see is that really the case, and then Text Styles, and then I find Tempo, and I see, well, it's set to 12 like it normally is, so why is it saying it's 28? It took me a moment to then realize, hey, down here where it says Tempo Text, the style is actually set to Title. Somehow it got set to Title, and there's a reset button there. So when I click that reset button, it changes back to tempo. That was probably an accidental change. It could happen like if you happen to do like a mouse wheel thing. Well, the older versions of MuseScore had a bug where if you did like 2-finger swipe or just generally tried scrolling your mouse wheel across a drop-down menu like this, it would change the settings without you really having asked it to. Current versions of MuseScore 3.6 don't do that, but I think like probably up until MuseScore 3.2, maybe that bug was there. So anyhow, that turned out to be the solution. Click the reset button there. So now I see that James has a quick question here about where the samples came from for Muse sounds, and I can only partially answer that because I know maybe a tiny bit more than what's publicly known, but not much. And so I don't, because the Muse Sounds, the development of that is sort of a separate team of people. It's not open source, right? That's why it's like a separate download. And I can tell you a little bit about that. the development of Muse sounds is very connected to StaffPad, the mobile app that Muse, the company that runs MuseScore, that used to be like Ultimate Guitar, then they kind of spun themselves into Muse. That's kind of the umbrella thing, like Google is part of Alphabet now. So Muse is the umbrella company. Muse bought StaffPad like a couple of years ago, and the main developer of StaffPad is still on board, and he is the one doing the development of Muse sounds. David William Hearns is, I believe, his name. And I know this because, well, his name shows right up there every time there's a bug fix. When someone submits a bug on GitHub, you see David William Hearns is the one fixing it. So, all right, he's the guy. So as far as where the samples came from, I'm not saying they came from what he had already recorded for StaffPad, but I think it's a collaborative effort there. So not coming from some other sample company, but I think it came from the expertise that had already been built up through StaffPad and is, other than that, kind of homegrown. So that is all I know really about Muse Sounds. That its pedigree is connected to that of StaffPad, but not any third party like Spitfire or Garritan or anything like that. Okay, so Dave, I see that Dave had asked a question about annotations, and I want to jump over to that. So choir and piano are not the same. Yes, and so here's the post here, and there's a question about annotations and adding markings to scores, and the short answer, Dave, is no, there's not really specific annotation features. I will say that it was a project in a Google Summer of Code several years back where someone was working on this, but they had some health issues and weren't able to really complete the project, and so it ended up not getting merged, and by now it's kind of ancient history, and it wouldn't be mergeable anyhow. And it wasn't all you would have wanted it to be because, well, like I said, he didn't really didn't finish everything that we would have wanted him to have finished. But there are ways of doing things that are maybe, I don't know, reasonable ways of doing things. So like you're showing here a red circle. And the idea is that this red circle should then be transparent, right? So that you can see the note through it. And you say that you've done this using the so you actually took a snippet of the score and then put it into Apple's preview and then added the circles with that. Well, I can certainly improve on that. So let's look at that. Let's look at just a plain simple score here that I don't have to worry about messing up. And I'm going to try to add a red circle around that note. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a text. And I think I'm going to add it as a fingering. And I'm going to add it as a fingering because I can control the position of fingering relative to the note head. Most other kinds of texts are controlled kind of relative to the staff, but fingerings are controlled relative to the note head. So if I go to add text fingering, and you see I've defined a custom shortcut for this, Control Alt F. There isn't one by default. I can add some text here. Now, what am I going to enter for my text? I'm going to just enter just the letter C for now, all right? Just to have this. Now, I said I can control the positioning relative to the note head. I'm not going to mess with that yet. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to give this thing a frame. So I've selected the text. Under text here in the inspector, I can change the frame to a circle. And I can change the border to red. And I can change the margin, just make it bigger, so that it looks like it'll be big enough to cover that note head. All right? You with me? So now when I zoom in on this thing, and actually maybe I'll make that a little thicker too. There we go. And it doesn't look red while it's selected. It looks blue, but when I click off of it, you can certainly tell it's red. So now here's the magic trick. That same setting here that we just looked at in Colleen's thing that had been set to title, it's set to fingering now. I don't want it set to fingering because MuseScore is trying to be smart and know, oh, on piano scores, fingering goes above. On guitar, for guitar fingering, it knows to put it to the left. It knows various things to do depending on the context. I don't want it to do that. I said fingering is going to allow me to position this relative to the note head. All I have to do is give it a style it doesn't know what to do with. As long as I'm calling it a fingering or a left-hand fingering or a right-hand fingering or a string number, it knows what to do. But if I give it one of my user styles here, it's not going to know what to do, and suddenly it's right on top of the note head. And I forgot that in doing that, when I changed the style, I just lost my settings. So that was silly of me, but I can certainly redo that quickly enough. Set my frame to rectangle and thickness a little bigger and margin a bit bigger and border red. So now this thing is positioned relative. Oh, and I can center it on. Oh, wait a minute. That's. Oh, it's centering it on the stem. So really, whatever. I'll make it be centered left and right, and then I can adjust it just the tiny bit that I need to. I need to give it an X adjustment of about half a space, and now it's circling the note. And so the only issue now is that I had to put a letter C in there. And what's a little bit annoying is I would love to be able to just put a space in there, and that kind of works. Whoops. Select this thing, space. Oh, because it's fingering, space is special. Space, when you're in fingering, actually goes to the next note to let you enter another fingering. So I'm going to have to use control space to give myself a space. The problem is that won't necessarily always work. The trying to put a frame around an empty text that just has spaces in it, it may be problematic. So instead of doing that, what I might do is double click this thing, go back to having a C, but let the C be transparent. So alpha channel is set to 255. Let's set it to 0. Now it's transparent. There we go. And now I can set this thing right on top. And now I've got myself my circle. So that seemed like a bunch of work to set that up, right? But the nice thing in MuseScore is now I can just take that thing and add it to a palette. So actually I'm going to reset its manual positions because I'm going to want to redo that. Redo that later, and then I can go to my text palette or maybe create a new palette. In fact, let's create a new palette and call it annotations because there's all sorts of annotations, and I've actually done this before. Add palettes, create custom palettes, and let's name it annotations. And now I'm going to Control Shift, or on Mac Command Shift, drag that sucker in there, and there it is. And now I want to circle another note. It's a whole lot simpler. All I have to do now. And the problem is, yeah, I could try to have. MuseScore is not going to preserve that manual position adjustment. So every time I do this, I'm going to have to, after adding it, just do that slight position adjustment. But that's all I'll have to do. And now it's really easy to add circles around notes. And I've actually created a whole bunch. If I switch my workspace. Oh, I don't have it on this system. That's right. I need to set that up on this system. But on my other system, I created a workspace called Annotations, and I've added red text to it, red text with yellow highlighter, and it's all done that exact same way. You add some text, you set it up in the inspector, and then Control-Shift drag it to your palette. Okay, so I see a question from Richard about putting graphics as page 1. And I'm going to try to answer that, but Richard, I might need a little more help with this. Let me close my inspector again because I'm not going to need it. And I'll close my palette again because I'm not going to need that. And let me just shrink this score down a little bit so we can see a little bit more. So you want a graphic page as page 1. So let's see. If what you're saying is currently you have page 1 has a title, so if I like maybe put a page break after the title, this is what you have, a title page, and then you want another page in front of that. Now, I will say, for doing this sort of fancy stuff, at some point you're not going to you're not going to want to do this in MuseScore. The capabilities are going to be a little too limited, a little too awkward, but it is going to be possible to do this. At some point though, you might give up and just say, you know what, let's use MuseScore for the music, export a PDF, and then use another program to add a title page, because there's all sorts of programs out there that specialize in either PDF editing or combining PDF files, so you can design your cover in Adobe Illustrator or whatever else, generate a PDF from that, and then combine the PDFs. If you're really trying to do something at all complicated, that's what you're going to want to do. But if all we want is another page here, what I'm going to need to do is insert another frame in front of this frame. So I'll select this frame and then say add frames, insert vertical frame. And now I have another frame. And I'll select it, Control Enter to put another page break there. And now I've got another page. And I can add my image there. So let's say we wanted our image to be a picture or our music. I will just do a quick little... Actually, I'll use the tool built into MuseScore. The tool built into MuseScore is really buggy when multiple pages are involved, and it's not there in MuseScore 4 because it needs to be fixed. So I'm just going to use my computer's screen grab thing to grab a little image there, and then come over here and paste it. And of course, I would have done this at higher resolution, but now I've got myself my cover image page. So that's how that would work. Okay, so I see a question also from Bob Borden, about going to reset audio and MIDI devices. So you shouldn't have to do that. Normally, when you play MuseScore, it should just play. But I can tell you a couple of things that might be happening. So first of all, you don't have to actually go to, when he says go to I/O, he's talking about going to Edit, Preferences, I/O, and then clicking the Restart Audio and MIDI Devices button here. That is kind of a solution to problems where, for whatever reason, MuseScore wasn't able to get a hold of the audio devices, like it wasn't able to make connections to the computer's audio. You shouldn't ever need to do that, but it's a workaround when you're changing devices, like if you're plugging in a sound, plugging in an external sound device or whatever, and things go wrong. But it's also the case that can happen if you are using any other program, like say a DAW, a digital audio workstation, that does what's called hogging the audio. So Bob, I don't know which operating system you're on. On Windows, there is a setting that you can get to if you do a web search on how to disable exclusive access. So do web search, disable exclusive access to audio, or exclusive use of audio. The word exclusive is the key word, and on Windows somewhere there's a setting for that. On Mac OS, it's called hog mode, and unfortunately, I don't think Mac OS has a setting that you as a user can change, but your digital audio workstation probably has a setting to disable hog mode. And then, anyhow, the point is that the reason you're ever having that problem is probably because of some other program hogging the audio device, or, as I said, a change in the audio system. But what I was starting to say before, and I will finish saying now, is instead of going to Edit, Preferences, I/O all the time, all you need to do is right here on the main toolbar where it's Toggle MIDI Input, turn it off, turn it back on. That has exactly the same effect. So Yeah, I guess I don't know what else might be going on, Bob, but I'm guessing that unbeknownst to you, there's some third-party program, could be a DLL, a shared library that was installed in some other program and is part of the startup sequence, and you're not even aware of it running. There's all sorts of system-related stuff that like I don't know about, but I will say that it doesn't happen on any of my systems, and there are, though, a handful of systems on which it does happen, and the people who have managed to figure it out have usually eventually been able to say, oh, yeah, it turned out to be an interaction with such and such a device or such and such a program. So all I can say is normally you don't have to do that, but sometimes interactions with other programs can cause that. Could be something else on your system. Could be like a device driver. Could be the device driver for your audio, for your sound card that's built into your computer needs to be updated. Could just be it's buggy. Don't know. But toggling that button at least lessens the pain, right? Okay. Um, and yeah, and Bob's making a similar observation about change of audio devices. Yeah, when you plug something in, and it's even if you're not really planning on using the thing, just plugging in a USB device that happens to be connected to audio, even if you don't actually use it, it constitutes a change, and that will happen. So yeah, these things happen, and that's our workaround, our best workaround for now. And the hope is with MuseScore 4, it's going to be better about detecting this stuff and just doing the right thing on startup. But the reality is, it's not going to be the case, I'm sure. It's still going to be sometimes be you have to go to the edit preferences and select devices manually. Okay, so I don't remember seeing anything else in the community, but I'm going to take another look here to see what else I see here in terms of any new messages with comments. Jim's commenting about the audio stuff in MuseScore 4. And these questions were all other things. Let's see if there's any other new messages here. Page 1 of choral music. I wonder if there's a question to be had in here, Richard. Okay. Oh, that's the same question. So there you go. So hopefully that question, the answer I just gave you, answered that. You insert a new frame. Insert a new frame is the trick. This is the frame for the title, and then it was add frames, insert vertical frame, and then putting a page break on it to force it to be a separate page. Can you cause text pages not to print? No, not that I know of, but there definitely isn't a toggle just to say don't print this page. However, you can say which pages you want to print. So if you want to print everything except page 7, then when you go to print, there should be like a dialog. Like I don't have a printer actually hooked up, so I'm going to see something pretty generic here, a print to PDF thing, which, by the way, don't ever use that. Don't ever use print to PDF utilities in MuseScore. Most likely you'll get font problems if you do that. Instead, go to File, Export to create PDF files. But anyhow, here's where I can select my page range. So I could just say to select print everything up until the page you don't want, and then do it again for everything after. And again, if you export to PDF, then a PDF editor will be happy to rip certain pages out for you. So that's possible also. So there we go. What else? What else can I help people with here? I'm happy to just make stuff up, but I want to answer the questions that people actually have. So I'm going to do a quick scroll and see if there was anything else that I missed. Saratoga Springs. So my family is in West Palm Beach, or no, actually in Jupiter, and in Hollywood. So that's anyhow. That's where my family in Florida is, and just as a little connection there, and that's where I grew up. Okay, so yeah, that's some stuff, and you guys are gonna need some more questions because I'm being long-winded in my answers, and I'm still caught up. So more questions. I will mention a couple other things that have been coming up recently that are good for people to know. Yeah, there's always so many things. I'm gonna give you a little bit of advice about preparing to eventually move scores over to MuseScore 4. So I'll give you some advice about that. But let's see. Chris is talking about spacing of grace notes relative to their parent. Yeah, so here's where I'm going to actually fire up MuseScore 4, and then we'll do a comparison. And in general, spacing issues are one of the huge reasons to be excited about MuseScore 4. So I'm going to create a new score here, and I'll just make it be a grand staff. And I'm going to come back to your question about organ and piano in a little bit. But let's talk about the dense spacing of notes. So let's put in some notes here, and then let's put in some grace notes. Oh, wrong shortcut. So I've added some things here, and then I maybe compress the spacing. So here's MuseScore 3. This is the spacing. But as I start adding notes, it might be doing some odd things with the spacing. Sometimes they might be too tight. Sometimes they might be too loose. I don't know. So I would say, Chris, if you have a specific score you'd like me to look at with a specific issue, let's talk about it. Post it. Just go to the click the little paperclip, and oh yeah, the time change in the United States I think is Sunday. So for me, I'm in Colorado. It's 10:30 when I started this, and so for me, my 10:30 is going to be an hour earlier. So probably most of you are going to see a change based on my time having changed. It's still 12:30 Eastern. That's always how I use. I don't know that at least in the United States, that's how we usually use as a reference point. I know everyone else uses UTC or Greenwich time, but for me it's always 10:30 my time, which is 12:30 Eastern time, and that will become an hour earlier next week. So if your time doesn't change between now and next week, know that mine did, and this thing will be an hour different next week. Yeah, so it is this Sunday. I thought it was, but I wasn't 100% sure. All right, so anyhow, this spacing of these grace notes here is what I'm seeing. And let me come over here just to make sure. Yeah, because if Chris, if you want to post something with an use the actual paperclip thing, then this paperclip right over here, that's what would allow me to then look at your score. But I do want to talk about spacing in MuseScore 4, so I'm going to create this thing and create the same basic score, grand staff template, done. And I got my new score here, and let's enter some quarter notes. And now let's select one of them and enter some grace notes. I don't know for sure like what specific issues you might have seen, but let's talk about this one right here. If I go to this F and make it an F sharp, well, let's make it the same thing, E flat. Notice what MuseScore 3 did here. It added all this extra space to make room for that flat sign, even though it wasn't necessary, right? The flat sign cleared that C. But it created all that extra room for it. MuseScore 4 is smarter about these things. So generally speaking, MuseScore 4 is going to be able to create more even spacing in any tightly cramped situation like that. Now let's try adding a slur. There's what that slur looks like. Let's try adding a slur in this version. I just had C's, so let me go C to C. Slur. So right here you can see MuseScore 3 draws the slur through the grace notes. MuseScore 4 managed to avoid the grace notes, right? There are just ridiculous numbers of improvements as far as things like that go between MuseScore 3 and 4. So there's any number of things that you have to fiddle with and painstakingly adjust in MuseScore 3 that in MuseScore 4 are just going to work better. The spacing of the notes and some additional collision avoidance and things like that. So a lot to look forward to there. All right. So let's talk about a couple other things that I saw in here. Okay, so Dean, virus software talking about MuseHub. Let me show you something about MuseHub that you need to know. So I'm going to be obviously flipping around here. I'm going to start MuseHub. I'm not going to run the background service for it that I would need to run to be able to actually use it on my system. I'm going to click the gear icon here. The gear icon, you'll see two settings here. One is automatically keep sounds up to date. I leave that one on personally. But here's the next one, enable community acceleration. For those of you who are familiar with BitTorrent, that's essentially what this is. It's a shared thing where instead of having one server for all of Muse sounds that gets bombarded when people try to download, it's a way of kind of offloading so that use a small portion of your internet bandwidth to accelerate downloads for others in the community. So, turn it off. I think probably, Dean, that is probably what you are seeing. Now, it's also the case that you can just shut down MuseHub and shut down its background service, and the details depend on your operating system and all. But so you don't have to uninstall MuseHub just to get around that. But most likely your virus software is noticing the traffic being generated by that option right there. So that is my guess as to what you would need to do to get around that. Okay. So Richard's next question here was about different settings for organ and piano. So yes and no. So here's the thing. In MuseScore 3, you had instruments, and then you had in the mixer the ability to select sounds for that instrument. That interface is changing in MuseScore 4, and it's still in development. So if I look at MuseScore 3, this is a piano instrument, right? If I click I can see it's a piano. And then if I open the mixer by pressing F10, you can see I can change the sound from grand piano to mellow or bright or electric or honky-tonk or all these things. These are different sounds for the same instrument. MuseScore 4 doesn't quite have that same concept, and something analogous will be coming, but right now it doesn't have that same concept. So here's MuseScore 4. In MuseScore 4, if I open the mixer, what you'll see is I can select the sound for it. MS Basic is the name of the sound font, but instead of choosing a new sound within the sound font, I will actually choose a different sound font or VST instruments. I don't have any VST instruments and they're not supported yet on Linux. But if I come to Muse Sounds and under Muse Keys, you'll see there's all these different keyboard sounds for the piano. So if I want to hear a Hammond organ, yeah, there it is. Sorry, I turned my volume down. Yeah, not very impressive when it's just one note, but anyhow, that's a Hammond organ with a whole lot of stops pulled out. So Muse Sounds has a bunch of sounds built into it, and then a lot of VSTs have sounds built into them. And so that gets to Michael's question. Oh, and also then, if I want to, I can come to the Instruments panel in MuseScore 4, use the gear icon, and replace instrument. And now, if I look under keyboards, yes, by default, I only see a handful here, but if I go to where it says Common, switch to All, now under Keyboard, you'll see all these other sounds. And so now it's still going to allow me to access all those same sounds I had before, but instead of doing it from the mixer, I'm going to do it by changing to that instrument. So that's going to be the recommended thing to do for now. If you need to change from one piano sound to another, yes, you can do it within Muse Sounds if you're using Muse Sounds, but if you're trying to access something within the basic sound font, you will do it by actually changing the instrument to upright piano, and then it will use the upright piano sound, which I guess is what we're hearing. Bob is asking about updating MuseScore 3 with MuseScore 4 features. You don't have to do anything. You just open it, and then there it is. Now, don't save over your MuseScore 3, right? Just like when going from 1 to 2, and just like going from 2 to 3, when you go from 3 to 4, a MuseScore 4 file you will not be able to open in MuseScore 3. So don't use MuseScore 4 and then save over your original file. That will be bad. I don't think MuseScore 4 is going to make it easy to do that. I think it's going to warn you if you try. But anyhow, that's just don't do that. Don't save over your MuseScore 3 file. Marla is asking, can you import an MP3 like audio? No, that sort of artificial intelligence is way beyond current technology. There are some tools out there that can do an incredibly bad, limited job of it with really, really, really simple music. But I'm being a little harsh, but no, that technology of just being able to take arbitrary sound and have some AI program sort it out into all the individual notes and make readable notation out of that, that's probably at least a decade away to have that work reasonably. As I said, there are experimental programs out there that can do a passable job with sufficiently simple programs, sufficiently simple audio, and if you can get them to export a music XML, you can try to bring it in. Chances of it actually being readable sheet music, if it's anything complicated enough that you couldn't have entered it yourself, the chances are very, very, very low. So I'm going to go ahead and open in MuseScore 4 a MuseScore 3 file. Let's take this one here that says Reunion 3.6 short, because I know I can safely overwrite that one because it's one I don't really need. And it's telling me it was last saved in MuseScore 3, and I will make a change to it. So this is one where I added staccato accents to everything just to test something that needed testing. I will go ahead and make a change to this. I will just transpose that up and back down an octave, and now I'll try to hit save. So when I hit save, rather than just saving it directly, it's going to start prompting me. Like this dialog, by the way, there's a new save to cloud feature that it's a little odd to me. It's related to MuseScore.com, but that's a whole other can of worms and still not sorted out entirely. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to say save to my computer, and then you can check the little box to not see that dialog box every time. And it will allow you to try to save to the same file name. But if I do that, again, it's going to warn you that it already exists. So MuseScore 4 is going to try to prevent you from saving on top of your old file. But if you ignore these warnings and say replace, it will save it on top of the old file. But instead, I would cancel and say, sorry, it's MuseScore 3.6 short, and then 4 is what I've been doing, just putting a -4 on it to remind myself that it's a MuseScore 4 version. So that's what I will be recommending. So now I want to come back to Michael's thing about articulations. So let's talk about the fall business. I'm going to open the MuseScore theme. Do I have it in here? I've done some work on this. The quick answer is that yes, there is more playback. In fact, it'll be easier for me to just do this. Let me just do this in a new score. I'm going to create a new score, and I will create it for trumpet. So I will say, I'll just use the jazz combo template. And I will add a trumpet note, and I'm going to add a fall to it. Arpeggios and glissandi, fall. And let's hear this thing. There you go. Not all that impressive sounding, right? It was obviously very computer generated, but the point is it did it automatically. So that's good, right? So yeah, that will work, and all these other markings will. There's limited, I think actually non-existent customization of that. If I go to the properties on this thing, you'll see there is no playback settings here. So there is no ability to customize that. So the old arpeggio workaround, not arpeggio, glissando workaround might be a little better, but there's limited settings for that also. So that's not very impressive. Now, if I switch this over to Muse Sounds, and let me just come here and pick Muse Brass Trumpet, one thing that I find is it doesn't like to play from the beginning of the score so much. It'll like take a moment for the first note to play, so I'm going to insert a measure before. Now let's hear it with Muse sounds. All right, so sounded better until that blip at the end, which is left over from MuseScore 3, which also had a blip at the end of Glissando's Down. Yeah, I got to report that one because I don't think that's been reported. But would you agree that actually sounded like a much more convincing fall up until that point? It did to me. Yeah, that was a convincing classical musician's version of a fall. You got to remember these are classical; these are going for orchestra types of effects. Yeah, that extra little blip and reverb there is obviously a bug. So that needs to be solved. Okay, so did I miss something else in here? I kind of feel like so Colleen's gone now, but yeah, no, it'll be the same time for everyone in the United States. It's the people outside the United States that are going to have to make an adjustment. So as far as other articulations and things, yeah, there's a couple other things that didn't used to play back in MuseScore 3 that will in MuseScore 4. Some of them will only work with using the Muse Sounds library. Things like slurs that will, in theory, for at least some sounds, play differently depending on whether you have notes slurred or not. There's some things like that will in fact play back when using Muse Sounds. So that's something to look forward to. I think I've caught up again to where I was. If someone tells me that I've missed something, let me know. Meanwhile, let me scroll back down. Shortcut to put the notes of the chord symbol into the bass clef. Yeah, actually there is. Let me. I haven't actually played with this in MuseScore 4, but I assume it works. But let's do this in MuseScore 3. What I'm going to do, first of all, it's not going to know which clef you want to do things in automatically, but I'm going to add my chord symbol here with Control K, and I'll say C7. And when I play this, oh, actually, this is still MuseScore 4, isn't it? Let's go back to MuseScore 3. Here's MuseScore 3. And I knew that because it didn't play the chord symbol when I entered it. That's a known bug. And it played it too loud. So here's my chord symbol. What I can now do is either right-click it and say Realize Chord Symbols, or you can click it and then come to Tools, Realize Chord Symbols. Where are you? Do you see? Oh, there it is. And when you do it this way, it just does it right away. But as you can see, it did it all on one staff. But yeah, you can copy and paste it. Now you've got the notes, and you can do what you want with them. Copy them onto the bass clef, split them up between staves, have a ball. Change the notes to get yourself another voicing, do whatever you want. But it's going to give you a bass note and a chord voicing. And so realize chord symbols is the command for that. Let me undo that for a second. If I right click this thing and say realize chord symbols, it actually pops up a dialog with some additional options. So that's how that goes. Oh, and articulations editable. Absolutely. It's definitely known that we want the articulations editable, and they're working on that. It's just not there yet. And that includes things like just ordinary accents and staccato. The plan is to make the definitions of every single articulation editable via this thing they're calling Muse. It's all Muse something, right? Not Muse Sounds. It's Muse Effects. No, it's not that. I forget what it's called, but something or other. So Bob was saying it took a long time to install MuseHub. Now, installing MuseHub itself shouldn't take long. So something might have gone wrong. The MuseHub installation should be virtually instant. However, then if you noticed when I actually started MuseHub, let me go ahead and do this again. MuseHub. When I start MuseHub, it's got all these sounds here these will take a long time to download for sure. The Muse Strings is the Woodwinds is the biggest one, and on my pretty fast internet connection, it took an hour to to download the Woodwinds, and then everything else combined was like an hour. So yeah, it took maybe 2-3 hours total to download all the sounds. But downloading MuseHub itself should be pretty instant. So could be something went wrong. All right. So Chris is now asking about handling Q notes. My short answer is no. There is nothing better right now in MuseScore 4. So the process for doing Q notes would be, if you want to show some Q notes in a score, this is MuseScore 3. Let me flip over to MuseScore 4 just to show you what it will look like. And let me shrink this thing down so I can still see my chat. It's, definitely something we all know we want, but it's just not there yet, right? So if you wanted to have G and then A, B, and then C, and you want this to be your Q notes, what you're going to need to do is select them, and then you'll come over to Properties and turn off the playback, and then you'll also say Q size. So that's maybe marginally simpler. Because those commands are right there in plain view. So maybe that's marginally simpler than it was in MuseScore 3. But it's still the case that then if this is something that you only want to show in a part and not the score, you'll still have to go over to the score and also mark those notes not visible. And when you do that, and when you do this, notice that it actually it got the notes and the stems together. So I guess that's a little bit better because I'm not sure how that worked in MuseScore 3. If I select a range here and then open the inspector, well, if I just press V, select that, press V. No, I got them all. But then you would need to re-add a rest. And so yeah, I guess this didn't change anything about the process there. But if you do that in the score, now you've got a measure with nothing in it, not even a rest. You need to re-add a rest in another voice, and you probably you wouldn't want that staff to be shown if you're hiding empty stays, and now this staff isn't empty anymore. It is a little bit of a mess, absolutely, and that aspect of it hasn't changed. But a little bit of it got marginally simpler. MuseScore community voluntary directory to find others. Now that's really interesting. No, there is not. But I'll tell you what, I'm more than happy to see something like that happen. So let me talk a little bit about my plans for the MuseScore 4 course, since I am caught up on questions at the moment. So my plan is, so those of you who have gone through or are going through or signed up for but never really looked at my MuseScore, my previous MuseScore course, it's a whole lot of videos, right? There's like 150 videos and they're each like, 10 to 15 minutes covering one individual feature. And I look at that as like an encyclopedia, right? It's an encyclopedia of videos that talk about each feature, but it's not necessarily designed for you to just go through the thing in order, because you have to go through a whole lot of boring stuff that you don't care about on every given feature. Like I tell you everything there is to know about time signatures before we move on past time signatures, and maybe you just wanted to know the bare basics of what to do with time signatures. So the MuseScore 4 course is going to be organized rather differently. It's going to have a quick path to success where I show you really how to be incredibly productive in a short period of time. I want to really maximize that. So, and it's going to be totally integrated into this community here. So, the whole Mastering MuseScore community business. In fact, let me just give you a quick little demo of where it is. It's still nothing much there, but there'll be this thing that says Mastering MuseScore, and then you'll see this view course. Here we go. So you're going to see these lessons and things in here, but you're going to see the lessons right here within the community. So if I click on one of these lessons, like this one here, this is one of these fast track ones, it'll show you the video for that lesson, and I don't think I have a video for it yet, but this is where it would be. and it's all right within the community. So, when I hit the back button, you see everything else that you're seeing. And so this is the case now that it's going to be connected to this business here. And so, yeah, I could totally have a section in there where we check in by location and all. I have this space here called Course Introduction, where I have a little welcome message. And as you can see, I'm starting early access. The course is empty right now, but those people who are gold level members just got an invitation yesterday. So yeah, I want it to be much more community focused. And so yeah, that's going to be a thing. Beyond that's all I have control of is what's in the course. I can't speak for anything else. Now, it's also the case that over on MuseScore.com, there's all sorts of groups that you can participate in their community, and yeah, you could try to set something up there. But yeah, I like this idea of trying to do things. I also like the idea, something I've been toying with and wanted to do for a long time, and next year might be the best year for me to do it, is to actually just do a little tour. Go around and visit, at least through the United States, visit some cities and do presentations at some college campuses and stuff. I haven't really had the flexibility in terms of my own time or my own schedule to do that, but I could probably do that next year. And so that's something I'll probably be putting some feelers out relatively soon. So yeah, ramping up the whole community aspect of what's going on is a big part of what I'm about and why I started this Mastering MuseScore community, but I can't speak to what the actual MuseScore people's plans might be there. I haven't heard that there's anything new being planned, though. Yeah, I'm sort of in this weird position where I did a lot of work on MuseScore in the past as a community volunteer. I have some insight and some ins with the people who are on the core team, but I'm not part of the MuseScore company at all. So I'm completely independent, and yet I am probably the biggest conduit of information from what's going on internally to the rest of the world. So yeah, that's some of that. Okay, so I'm still just kind of stalling, looking for more questions to perhaps be able to address. But as far as your question, Chris, when I said that there was nothing really new, it's definitely something well known that we want to improve. And I keep using the word we because, yeah, I still associate myself with MuseScore development, even if I'm not actively involved with it. But the guy who's kind of in charge, well, there's two people who are going to be key to that effort. One is a guy named Bradley and another guy named Simon. And Simon is kind of the notation expert. Bradley is the user interface expert. And between the two of them, it is known to be kind of a priority to try to improve things like Q notes and to have a feature where you could just easily select a passage, select a section in the bassoon, and then say make into Qs and it'll say, oh, what instrument do you want to give these Qs to, or however it would work. A feature that just automatically does that, copies the notes, and not just copies them, but makes it link. So if then you change the bassoon part, those cues would update anywhere else you've used them, right? That would be something we would all want, that kind of linking. But automatic handling of the size and the visibility and all that. Oh yeah, because these notes need to be small too, right? Well, I did that already. So yeah, that is definitely on the radar for something that they would love to be able to do in a better fashion. And so, yeah, it's not going to happen for 4.0, but 4.1 to whatever. I would totally expect to see that at some point. Okay. Add a text paragraph at the end of a composition. All right, that's a nice simple one. Let's come back to MuseScore 3 here. The process will be similar in 4, but what I'm going to do is use that same add frames menu, but now I'm going to say append text frame. I could say text frame or vertical frame, but if it's just a paragraph, so the difference is basically a vertical frame is what you have in the title of your score. In other words, this thing here, and you see it has multiple things in it, right? It can have a title within it, it can have a composer within it, it can have images within it, it can have lots of stuff within that one block. And then so if to add something to it, you would right click it and say add one of these things. But if all you really want is a paragraph at the end, we can just say add frames, and instead of appending, and we're going to use append rather than insert, append, we'll put it at the end of the score. Instead of appending a vertical frame, we can just say append text frame. And now all you have to do to enter some text is double click it and start typing. And it will automatically size it. And there it is. Now this goes down right after the last staff. It won't necessarily push it all the way to the bottom of the page, so you might also need to select this thing and use the palette to insert a spacer up on it. Oops, got to select text frame, spacer up. Can I not put a spacer up on a text frame? Apparently not. All right, I'll put a spacer down on this guy. And then you can, double click this thing and push it. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, yeah. For that doesn't work. Instead, it's opening the inspector with F8, selecting that frame, and playing with the, I've selected the text. That's a little bit annoying. Select the frame, and then you can play with the gap above. Increase that gap above. So anyhow, frames. Appending a frame is how to do this. My spelling is here. Oh, yeah, my spelling. But I'm fast. Yeah? So yeah, that's a common thing. One little trick about this that you might want to know, I said if it's just a paragraph of text, then you don't need all the fanciness of a vertical frame. But let me do this again, and this time I'm going to say add frames, append vertical frame. I'm going to do one thing now. I'm going to say add text, and this is the first paragraph. And now I'll spell badly again. Now I'm going to come in here again and say add text. This is the second paragraph. And now take that sucker and just, I'm using Control Right to just move it over. Now you got yourself multiple columns, right? All I did was added 2 text elements within that frame. So now the next question is how to leave this out of the parts, and the answer is you don't. You can make it invisible. You can make the text invisible, but you can't make the frame itself not appear in the parts. That actually just came up in the forum. So if you have a need for text that's in the score but not the parts, I'll tell you my suggested workaround. If I want there to be some text in here that's going to be in the score but not in the parts somewhere, instead of trying to put it in a frame, I will add it as staff text. So if I want there to be like a footnote down here, I will select the bottom staff, add some staff text, and just drag this thing down to the bottom. MuseScore will create some space for me and say footnote, blah, 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 blah. And now I've got some text that's in the score and won't be on any parts except the drum part. And then in the drum part, I can just select that sucker and press V to make it invisible. So that's the thing. So yeah, Bob, the text frame don't allow for manual sizing. They just size automatically. So you don't need manual sizing. But if you want extra space above and below, you use the inspector to increase that the margins, right? So let me undo all my changes here. In my example there, I didn't have a text frame, but yeah, the same story. If I open the inspector, I've got the gap and I've got the margin. Gap is the space above or below the frame itself. Margin is the space between the top of the frame and the contents within it. both of those things are available for text frames also. And Dave, yes, sorry you got caught out by daylight savings time. Definitely go back and watch the thing, because at the beginning I showed you how to create this. Let's say I want to circle the E, bam, and move it over. So once you go through the process of setting things up the way I show you at the beginning of the video, then it's that easy to add the annotation of that circle and other annotations too. So then I showed you exactly how to create that at the beginning there. Okay, so will MuseScore 4 reintroduce a layers-like feature? Is someday, perhaps. I mean, it's been on the radar for a long time. It was partially implemented years ago and never completed. Yeah, so there's all sorts of things that could mean, what these layers might mean. It could be used for annotations, could be used for stuff in the score, not the parts. Yeah, I would not be surprised to see something like that happen at some point. And if you want to add text to an existing published piece, replace the entire piece. Not sure what you mean by that, Richard. But I'll tell you what. I'm going to, because it's been an hour, and you know that because now all the people who got the time zone wrong are showing up. So what I'm going to do is, give you an opportunity to try to clarify that question, and it might be something that we just deal with by talking about in the community instead. But as it is, let's start the sucker over. This has been Marc Sabatella with the MuseScore Café for November 2nd, 2022, and had a lot of fun answering all of your questions here, so thanks so much for all of that. Next week, I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about MuseScore Beta, and in particular, what it really means to be a beta, how to participate, set reasonable expectations, and how to contribute suggestions and make bug reports, and just really how, what we're really doing with this beta. So I'll talk about that a bit more next week. Tomorrow for Music Masterclass, my main subject is going to be improvisation, because that's what we've been talking about, or what I started talking about this week in the musicianship skills workshop. Might look at some other music that's been posted, but I'm going to be focusing a bit on improvisation tomorrow. So that's something to possibly look forward to if you happen to be set up in a place where you can be on camera, and you want to come in and actually get some critique on your own improvisation, or if you want to record yourself and have me give feedback on that, tomorrow would be a good day for it. By published, Richard, you mean on MuseScore.com? Yeah, just add the comments and re-upload it. Just hit the upload button, and it'll just re-upload it. So that should do it. So hopefully that's all you mean. And if not, go ahead and ask in the community itself. All right, everyone. Thanks again, and I will see you next time.